Okay, we're going to jump back in time a little bit here and talk about Andrew Jackson's presidency and the Indian Removal Act. So you have to remember that a lot of this was happening at the same time. So even though we're skipping around years in the 1800s, it's just the way that we teach the units, again, because a lot of this went on at the same time. So just like we typically do in class with your graphic organizer that you should have open using the Google Slides that I attached, make sure you copy down when you see the red writing and the pencil icon in the correct location on your notes on your chart. So Andrew Jackson, in the year 1828, was an election year. He ran for president against John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams is the son of our second president, John Adams, and he was running for re-election. So Andrew Jackson, as you remember, was a war hero from the War of 1812, specifically the Battle of New Orleans, which was the final battle of the war. The war had actually been had ended, and they just weren't aware of that yet. We also talked about Andrew Jackson when we talked about the acquisition of Florida and the Seminole Indians that had been raiding Georgia and helping slaves to escape. So Andrew Jackson went down and fought against those groups. So keep in mind that he has some bias against the Native Americans. Andrew Jackson was born on the frontier in rural South Carolina. His father died when he was young, and his family lived in poverty, meaning they were very poor. Jackson joined a South Carolina militia during the Revolutionary War when he was only 13 years old. He became a lawyer out in the Tennessee frontier. He had a hot temper and often fought duels with men who disagreed with him. He served in the Tennessee House and Senate. So those are the two houses that make up Congress, our legislative branch of government. But he gained national popularity when he defended the port city of New Orleans from the British during the War of 1812. So we can say Andrew Jackson was a man that wore many hats. So that means he had many different jobs, a lot of experience. So if we were together in class, I would bring this picture up and ask you to tell me what you notice about it, and maybe get some questions and a discussion going about what that makes us wonder. So some of the things that I would hope you would point out would be these people here. So you see a lot of men that are wearing these top hats. They're dressed in almost like a suit. So wondering, who are they? Who do they represent? So they are the wealthy or the upper class. And then we've got guys that look a little bit different. So they've got more of like a straw hat on. They're dressed a little bit more casually. So who do they represent? They would be the working class, or those that maybe were poor, or a lot of them were farmers. And then let me just click off of this slide here. So up here we see a booth and a guy kind of handing in some type of piece of paper. What might that be? Hopefully you were thinking a ballot of some kind. Maybe this man is voting. So voting looks a little bit different than today than it does here, but that's actually what is occurring in this picture. So these are voters in the presidential election of 1828. So on your graphic organizer in the upper class box, you're going to fill in this quote. So until the 1820s, the right to vote had been limited to the rich and upper class. Only white men who owned property were considered educated enough to choose the country's leaders. They would pay more in taxes and felt that they were more impacted by the opportunities and challenges of the nation. So if you need more time to copy down the notes, you can always pause and then resume when you are ready. Andrew Jackson promised a new kind of government that would represent the common people. He wanted to represent the poor, the farmers, the workers. New western states in the Appalachian Mountains had a new kind of voter ready to have a voice in government. So under common people, you're filling in citizens should all be able to vote, regardless of wealth and education. We all share the same opportunities and risks of this country. Andrew Jackson helped to form a new political party for the common man called the Democratic Party. He won the election of 1828 and became the 7th president of the United States, starting the Democratic Party. So this became known as Jacksonian democracy, the idea that the common people should control the government. So an inauguration, that is when the candidate that wins the election is actually sworn in and officially starts serving as president. They usually have some kind of ceremony and speeches given during the day, and then at night they go back to the White House to celebrate. So on March 4th, 1829, over 10,000 people came from all over the country to witness Jackson's inauguration. Many were first-time voters who felt they finally had a leader to represent all people, not just the wealthy and educated class. A huge crowd followed the new president back to the White House, where the inaugural celebration got a little out of hand and turned to a chaotic mess of rioting and looting. So obviously the wealthy, the upper class, were kind of looking down on Jackson, basically like, I told you so, and these common people shouldn't have participated in this election, and they don't have the right to vote, and they don't even know how to act, and that sort of thing. So moving on to the second slide of notes and the Indian Removal Act. The U.S. government had been making treaties with Native American tribes since we had gotten our independence from Britain. Typical treaties promised Indian payments of food, supplies, and money in exchange for giving up their old lands. They were moved to new lands that they were told would be theirs forever. Despite the treaties, American Indians continued to be pushed off of their lands further and further west. So under the Indian Removal Act scroll, this was a law passed by Congress in 1830, which allowed the president to make treaties, agreements with Indians. So this is, giving something in exchange for something. A lot of these promises were broken by the Americans, by the government. It was supposed to be voluntary, but as I just said, the natives were moved and then typically moved again from their land, and then from the land that was given to them after that. Andrew Jackson had been a frontier settler. He had little sympathy for American Indians who felt the white settlers were pushing them off of their lands. During Jackson's presidency, it became part of the national policy to remove natives by force, if necessary, to give American settlers more room. By the time Jackson was president, only 125,000 Indians lived east of the Mississippi River. Jackson was determined to remove the remaining tribes further west. So under the second Andrew Jackson box, you're filling in that he was determined to move Indians west of the Mississippi River. So this would be the Cherokee settlement here. So you can see that they're living in a little community. The government had wanted them to become more American. So there's a term called assimilation, wanting to assimilate the Native Americans to the American culture. So basically wanting the natives to give up their way of life, to practice Christianity, to get an American education, to speak English, to dress American, to do jobs that Americans would do. So in this particular case, they were farming. But even though they were being assimilated and becoming more American, that wasn't good enough for the government. The U.S. government still wanted their land. So the Cherokee Indians were living peacefully in their ancestral lands that spread from South Carolina across Georgia and Alabama and up into Tennessee and Kentucky. They had worked to coexist with settlers and even adapted to many European methods of farming and living. When a small amount of gold was discovered on Cherokee land, settlers wanted the land for themselves to look for more mineral wealth. So in this case, it was gold. Sometimes it was just the land that the government wanted, and other times it was natural resources such as oil. So you can see here we're talking about the southeastern part of the U.S., east of the Mississippi. For the Cherokee, it was specifically or mostly Georgia, the state of Georgia, and wanting to move them west of the Mississippi River. So this is their chief, John Ross, chief of the Cherokee tribe. He had adopted a democracy. They had their own constitution, and as I said, he was elected chief to lead the sovereign Cherokee nation. Sovereign means independent. If the U.S. government was going to make a treaty with the Cherokee for their lands, they would need Chief John Ross to participate. Most of the Cherokee, though, did not favor trading their lands east of the Mississippi River. So under Chief John Ross, filling in elected Cherokee leader. Samuel A. Worcester was a missionary and translator to the Cherokee who helped fight and defend the sovereignty of the Cherokee Nation. He was arrested and convicted for disobeying Georgia's law restricting white missionaries from living in Cherokee land. His appeal went to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1832. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Marshall established that the United States must treat Indian nations as sovereign nations. This meant that the Indian Removal Act passed by Congress in 1830 was unconstitutional. So filling in under Chief Justice John Marshall, Supreme Court Indian Removal Act was unconstitutional. So basically the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Cherokee, in favor of the Native Americans, stating that the U.S. had no right to take their land from them, that it was sovereign, it was independent. So that brings us to the Trail of Tears. President Jackson refused to enforce the Supreme Court's ruling. He sent representatives to try to make a treaty with the Cherokee again. John Ross met with the officials but walked away from the treaty knowing it was not what his people wanted. Instead, the U.S. representatives continued to negotiate with Cherokee Major John Ridge and a handful of other Cherokee men who signed what was called the Treaty of New Echota, exchanging the Cherokee's land east of the Mississippi River to the United States in exchange for $5 million and land in Indian Territory, which is now the present-day, modern-day state of Oklahoma. Chief Ross was not at the signing of the treaty. So that brings up the question, is the treaty legal? So filling in under the Trail of Tears box, the removal of the Cherokee Indians from Georgia to Indian Territory, which again is present-day Oklahoma, in the year 1838. There were about 4,000 Cherokee and other Native Americans that died on this journey. So you can see this line here would represent the route of the Trail of Tears, and this is the Mississippi River. So moving from that southeast, again, mostly Georgia, east of the Mississippi, across west of the Mississippi to present-day Oklahoma. So Chief John Ross and many others petitioned Congress to reject the Treaty of New Echota because John Ridge and the others who signed the treaty were not rightful leaders of the Cherokee. But President Jackson had what he wanted, a treaty signed by Cherokee giving up their eastern lands. Even after Jackson's term as president was over, President Martin Van Buren carried out the terms of the treaty anyway. Over 17,000 Cherokee were rounded up and forced to leave their homelands. So filling in your timeline at the bottom, the year 1830 and 1838. 1830 is when Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, and 1838 was when the Cherokee traveled the Trail of Tears. So the Trail of Tears, or in Cherokee meaning the trail where they cried, was over 2,000 miles and crossed 9 states. Some Cherokee were taken on routes by water, others walked on foot. U.S. General Winfield Scott and 7,000 soldiers escorted the Cherokee. It was a harsh and difficult journey. Those who couldn't keep up were left to die. Of the 17,000 Cherokee who were forced on the journey, roughly 4,000 died before reaching Indian Territory. After the Cherokee arrived in their new territory, Major John Ridge, again, he was the one that signed that Treaty of New Echota, was assassinated by men from Chief Ross's group who felt that Ridge had sold out the Cherokee people.